What if the person you've been secretly craving for months just walked in on you, no warning, no prep, and did something that completely flipped your world upside down? Sounds like a fantasy, right? But this isn't a story of make-believe. This is real, and what came next will change everything you thought you knew. Stick around, because after this, nothing will ever feel the same again. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. It's funny how life has a way of leading us down paths we never expected. When I first met Silas, it wasn't some grand, fate-driven moment. It was just an ordinary roommate interview, a chance to find someone to split rent with. I had just moved to the city, looking for something fresh, a new beginning. But what I didn't expect was for him to be the kind of guy who could completely unravel my carefully constructed walls. We were roommates, simple as that. At least that's what we agreed on. Two guys, sharing space, paying rent. No complicated emotions, no attachment, nothing that could blur the lines. The agreement was clear, right? But as time passed, those lines began to fade, and everything that seemed so simple started to feel complicated. Silas was the kind of guy who didn't even need to try to be magnetic. He had this presence, this quiet confidence that drew people in. His dark hair always looked like it was a little messy in the best way, and his eyes? Piercing gray, like they could see through you in a way that made your heart race. And his body, let's just say, if there were any doubts about the effect he had on people, they were quickly erased when he walked into a room. But what got me the most wasn't just his looks or his charisma. It was how he carried himself, how he made you feel seen, even if you didn't want to be. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he's straight, that was the agreement. But every accidental brush of his hand, every lingering glance, it made that agreement feel more like a lie. I wasn't blind. He knew it too, or at least I thought he did. Those moments, brief, fleeting, but electric, were more than just friendly gestures. And yet, we didn't talk about it. We didn't confront the tension that was building between us. After all, what good would that do? But still, every time Silas and I found ourselves alone, there was this energy between us. I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, or he'd stand just a little too close in the kitchen, making it harder to ignore the chemistry. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just the natural closeness of two people who spent too much time together. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Our conversations, which started as casual and safe, slowly grew more personal. Late-night talks that were supposed to be about nothing would slip into territory that felt too close for comfort. We started sharing things we hadn't planned to, past relationships, insecurities, fears. With every conversation, every laugh, every accidental touch, I found myself more and more pulled into this world where the lines between friendship and something more blurred. And even though I tried to ignore it, tried to keep my emotions in check, I couldn't help but feel it. I started to notice things. Silas standing in the doorway, watching me when I wasn't looking, or the way he'd brush past me, his body just inches from mine. These moments felt insignificant, but they weren't. They were like small sparks in a dry field, and every time they happened, I felt that fire grow. I should have said something. I should have drawn the line. But I didn't, and that's what scared me most, because in some twisted way, I didn't want to draw the line. I didn't want to acknowledge that the thing I was trying so hard to ignore was exactly what I wanted. I knew better than to entertain the idea. I'd made a promise to myself that I wouldn't complicate things, that I wouldn't let myself get caught up in feelings that didn't belong. But as much as I told myself that, the truth was different. And Silas, he wasn't making it easy to pretend it wasn't there. So here we were, roommates, two guys with an unspoken understanding. Or so I thought. But the more we coexisted, the more I realized that this agreement, this boundary we'd set, was fragile at best. And as much as I tried to push back the feelings I didn't want to have, Silas, with his quiet confidence and lingering touches, kept pulling me closer. It was all so easy to ignore at first, but life has a way of forcing you to face the truth. And when the unexpected happened, when Silas walked into that shower, everything I had been avoiding suddenly had a name. The lines I had spent so long trying to keep intact. They had been erased, and I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing between us would ever be the same again. The night everything changed didn't start any differently than any other. I had just come back from a long day at work, mentally exhausted, like I always was. I craved a hot shower, a moment to just relax and let the day wash off me. I didn't expect anything unusual to happen. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night. But life has a funny way of catching us off guard, doesn't it? The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Except for the distant hum of the city outside and the soft buzz of the air conditioning. I thought I was alone. I should have been alone. Silas had been busy, out with friends, doing his own thing. But something about that night felt different. The air felt heavier, more charged, even though I couldn't put my finger on why. I stepped into the bathroom, the mirror fogging up as the steam from the shower began to fill the room. I turned on the water, letting the heat cascade over me, hoping it would ease the tension that had been building all week. I closed my eyes for a moment, tilting my head back and letting the water hit my neck, feeling the warmth seep into my muscles. My thoughts wandered, as they often did, and for reasons I couldn't explain, my mind wandered to him. Silas, the one person who had been occupying more of my thoughts than I cared to admit. He was my roommate. That's what we were, right? But deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. I had tried to keep it contained, tried to convince myself that our relationship was just friendly, casual. That's all it was supposed to be. But the moments we shared, the chemistry we couldn't deny, started to seep through the cracks. The accidental brushes of his hand, the lingering looks, the way he would always be just a little too close, even when there was plenty of space. And yet, despite all of that, I told myself he was straight. We were just roommates, no harm done. But as I stood there under the hot water, I heard something that made my heart stop. The door opened, the unmistakable sound of bare feet crossing the tile floor. I froze, my mind raced. Was I hearing things? Or was it him? Silas. Silas? I called out, my voice trembling, betraying me before I even realized it. No answer, just the faint sound of footsteps getting closer. Before I could react, the shower curtain was pulled back, and there he was. Silas, naked, the world stopped. For a second, nothing else existed. Just him, standing there in front of me, his gray eyes locked on mine, a daring smirk curling at his lips. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything I had tried to suppress, everything I thought I had under control, came crashing down in that one moment. His presence, his body, the way he was standing there, completely exposed, was a shock. Not just physically, but emotionally, he was so close, too close. And then, like he had all the time in the world, he stepped into the shower with me. His body pressed against mine, a heat I couldn't ignore. The steam around us only seemed to make the air heavier, more intimate. "Mind if I join?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper, but filled with something I couldn't name. It wasn't the words that struck me the hardest. It was the look in his eyes. There was no more pretense. No more acting like we were just roommates. He was here, and he wasn't hiding anything anymore. It was like everything we had tiptoed around for so long had finally exploded into reality. And as much as I wanted to push him away, to say something, anything, to stop this from happening, I couldn't. His body was close, too close, and my heart raced. Every part of me screamed to walk away, to avoid the inevitable mess that was about to unfold. But my body was betraying me. I couldn't move. I couldn't tell him to stop. Instead, I stood there frozen, my breath shallow, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Levi," he murmured, his lips barely brushing my ear, his breath hot against my skin. "You've got no idea how long I've wanted this." My pulse surged. Those words. They cut through the fog of confusion and straight into my heart. How could he say that? How could he be standing there telling me all the things I had wanted to hear, but had been too afraid to ask for? I should have been angry. I should have told him to get out, to respect the boundaries we had set. But instead, all I could do was stand there, paralyzed, Every part of me wanted this, but I was terrified. Terrified of what it meant. Terrified of how everything between us could change in an instant. "Silas, what are you doing?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of the water crashing around us. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, but the intensity in his gaze sent a jolt through me. He was fighting something. I could see it in the way his body tensed, the way his breath caught in his throat. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed, his voice raw and tight. "I've spent so long pretending I didn't feel it that none of this was real. But every time you walk into a room, every time you look at me like I'm untouchable, I lose it. And tonight, I couldn't lie anymore." The words hit me like a wave, crashing over me. This wasn't just some reckless mistake, this was real. It had been real for so much longer than either of us had admitted. And now we were standing on the edge, about to make a choice that would change everything. "I've been lying to you, Levi," Silas continued, his hand brushing the back of my neck, his fingers threading through my damp hair. "I lied to myself. But I don't want to lie anymore. Tell me to stop, and I will. But if you don't, I'm not walking away." His breath was hot against my lips, his words like a challenge and a plea at the same time. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't want him to stop. I didn't want to walk away. I was drowning, but not in water. I was drowning in something deeper, something more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. But I couldn't walk away. Not this time. The morning after is always the hardest, isn't it? The night has passed, but the echoes of it linger in the air, in your mind, in the space between two people who just crossed a line they never thought they would. It's that awkward, uncertain pause, where everything you thought you knew about your life, your relationships, and your boundaries suddenly feels different. I woke up with the soft glow of daylight creeping through the blinds, the kind of light that should feel comforting, but instead only highlighted the tension still hanging in the room. I could feel the weight of it, even though Silas wasn't there beside me. I reached over, half expecting to feel him there, but the bed was empty. It was almost like everything that happened the night before had been a dream, something I'd imagined. But then, I remembered. I remembered the feel of his body against mine in that shower. The heat of his skin, the way he kissed me like he'd been waiting for it his whole life. I remembered his eyes, raw and vulnerable, finally telling me the truth he'd been hiding for so long. I remembered the words that haunted me. "Tell me to stop, and I will." The problem wasn't the kiss. It wasn't even the touch. The problem was everything that came after. The morning always brings clarity, but sometimes it's the kind of clarity that leaves you questioning everything. I lay there for a few more minutes, hoping the weight of it would just disappear. But it didn't. Instead, it sat there, heavy, like an unspoken promise that neither of us was ready to break. I finally dragged myself out of bed, the sound of my footsteps feeling too loud in the stillness of the apartment. It was as if the whole world had paused, waiting for me to take the first step. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next. Was I supposed to pretend like nothing happened? Was I supposed to confront it head-on and make sense of it all? Because in that moment, it felt like there was no easy way forward. I heard Silas in the kitchen before I even saw him. The sounds of mugs clinking, the soft hum of the kettle boiling. He was already up, already moving through the motions of a normal morning, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I stepped into the kitchen, and he didn't even look up at first. It was like he was avoiding me, or maybe it was just his way of trying to keep some distance between us. But I couldn't let it go that easily. "Are we really going to pretend nothing happened last night?" I asked, my voice shaky, unsure if I even had the right to ask. The tension between us was palpable, hanging in the air like a fog neither of us knew how to clear. Silas didn't respond right away. He just stood there, his back to me, his hands wrapped around his mug. I could see his chest rise and fall with every breath he took. There was a stillness to him that I hadn't seen before, a quiet that spoke louder than words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "I wasn't thinking," he said, his words like a quiet confession. "It was late, I was half asleep. You said a lot of things. I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say?" He had a point. We both had said a lot of things that didn't quite match up with what was happening between us. I lied, he continued, his voice breaking the silence. I've been lying to you, to myself. I didn't know how to do this. And there it was, the truth. The raw, unfiltered truth that we had both been avoiding. The truth that neither of us had known how to handle. The truth that, for the first time, was being laid bare between us. You make this harder than it should be, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Living with you, seeing you every day, telling myself we're just friends when I know damn well that something's not normal about the way I feel when you look at me. His words hit me harder than I expected. They were honest, and they were raw. And they made everything I had been feeling come to the surface. I didn't have to think long. The words were there, already forming in my mind. Then don't pretend, I said, my voice quiet but steady. Stop fighting it. He took a step back, his shoulders tense as if he were trying to keep everything under control, but I could see it in his eyes. The fear, the uncertainty, the hesitation. I can't, he said. I need time. And just like that, I knew. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to face it, to face us, and maybe I wasn't either. So we stood there, two people on opposite sides of the kitchen, neither knowing what to do next. The silence between us felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on us with every passing second. In the days that followed, nothing was the same. Silas avoided long conversations, kept his distance, and the tension grew. It was like we were both walking on eggshells, afraid to speak the truth for fear of what would happen if we did. Every moment we were in the same room felt charged with something neither of us was ready to confront. But even in the silence, even in the confusion, I couldn't ignore what had happened. And neither could he. We were both caught in the aftermath, trying to figure out how to move forward, but unsure of where to start. The morning after may have been filled with awkwardness and hesitation, but deep down, I knew one thing for sure: we couldn't pretend forever. The tension was there, and eventually, we'd have to face it, together. It's strange, isn't it? How we can be so close to someone yet feel like we don't really know them at all. How, even when we spend so much time together, there are pieces of each other we keep hidden. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of letting someone see the parts of us that we've kept locked away for so long. The silence between Silas and me had stretched on for days. The tension, thick and almost suffocating, was like a constant hum in the background of every moment. We were living in the same apartment, sharing the same space, but it felt like there was an invisible wall between us. We weren't talking about what had happened, and neither of us seemed to know how to start. But sometimes, it takes just one moment, one crack in that wall to bring everything tumbling down. It was late that night when I came home from work. I was exhausted, my mind heavy with the weight of the week, when I walked into the living room to find Silas sitting there on the couch, headphones around his neck, staring at the TV. He didn't notice me right away, and for a second, I stood there, watching him. He looked so distant, like the man who had shared the most vulnerable moment of my life just days ago was now a stranger. But maybe we were both strangers to each other in that moment. We were avoiding the one thing that needed to be said, the thing that could change everything. I cleared my throat, stepping into the room, my voice soft, unsure. Are you okay? He looked up at me, offering a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I will be. There was something about his response, something in the way he said it, that made my heart clench. I knew it wasn't just the exhaustion. There was more behind those words, and I couldn't let it go anymore. I sat down next to him, just close enough to feel the heat of his body, but far enough to keep the distance we both had built up. This thing between us, I started, my voice shaky. We can't keep pretending it didn't happen. The words felt heavy as they left my lips, like they were carrying the weight of everything we had avoided saying to each other. I was holding my breath, waiting for him to say something, anything, to break the silence that had become a constant companion. For a long moment, Silas didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. But then he spoke, his voice low, almost reluctant. "I know," he said. "But pretending feels safer than the alternative." The alternative. What was that? What was so scary about admitting what we both knew was there? The desire, the connection, the truth we had both been hiding from. I leaned in, my hand instinctively reaching out to rest on his. "What are you afraid of?" I asked gently. Silas closed his eyes, his grip tightening around my hand. "That I won't be able to stop," he admitted quietly. "That if I let myself feel this, I won't be able to walk away." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I could see the fear in his eyes now. It wasn't just fear of what this could mean for us, for our friendship, for everything we had built together. It was fear of losing control, of losing himself in something he wasn't sure he could handle. But then I realized something. He wasn't the only one who had been afraid. I had been too. We had both been living in a world of fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of what others would think. Fear of letting ourselves feel something so deep and powerful. "You don't have to walk away," I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm that was building in my chest. "Not from me. Not from this." He looked at me, his expression softening just a little. "I don't know how to do this, Levi," he confessed. "I've spent so long pretending I didn't feel it, that now I don't know how to make sense of it all." His honesty was like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't easy, but it was real. It was everything we needed, to stop pretending, to stop lying to ourselves, and to just let it be. "I know it's complicated," I said, "but we can't keep pretending. We can't keep hiding. We're here right now and this is real. So let's figure it out together." And just like that, the wall between us started to crack. Slowly at first, but with each word, each moment of honesty, it fell apart. The fear wasn't gone, but it was no longer in control. We didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, we were willing to be vulnerable, willing to open up and see where this could go. "Tell me to stop and I will," Silas said, his voice trembling with the weight of his own emotions. But I didn't want him to stop. I didn't want to stop either. And so I didn't tell him to. Instead, I pulled him closer, letting the distance between us close, not in desperation, but in mutual understanding. We didn't rush. We didn't force anything. We simply let ourselves be. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in what felt like forever, we weren't pretending anymore. This moment, this revelation, wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of something more honest, more raw, more real than either of us had ever expected. And even though the path ahead wasn't clear, we were ready to walk it together. In life, we often stand at the edge of a moment, staring into the unknown. It's the kind of moment where everything shifts, the kind where you realize the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as you thought. It's fragile, delicate, and yet, somehow, it feels like this is the moment you've been waiting for your entire life. After everything Silas and I had been through, the confusion, the fear, the unspoken truths, we were finally standing in the same space. Both of us no longer pretending, no longer hiding. I could feel it in the air, thick with possibility. The promise of something new, something different, was hanging between us, but I could tell that this wasn't going to be an easy journey. We had opened up, yes, but opening up didn't mean everything would be smooth sailing from here on out. It meant we had started something real, something raw, and now we had to navigate the uncertainty that comes with being vulnerable, with truly letting someone in. The words Silas had whispered to me last night echoed in my mind. "I don't want to lose you." There was so much weight in those words, a heaviness I hadn't expected. The fear in his voice told me everything. He had never allowed himself to feel like this before. He had spent so long protecting himself, hiding from what he really wanted, that now, in this moment, he was facing it all head on. And like him, I felt the weight of that responsibility too. We were both standing on a precipice, unsure of how far we'd fall if we took the plunge. As I lay there beside him, in the quiet of the early morning, I could feel his heartbeat against mine, steady and slow. There was a peace in the air now, a kind of calm that came from knowing that we didn't have to pretend anymore. But the silence wasn't just comforting. It was charged. It held the promise of change, of growth, and I couldn't ignore it. "You know what you want," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at me, his eyes dark, but clear. For the first time in a long while, I saw the truth in them. Not the guarded uncertainty, but something much more open. Vulnerability. "I do," he said, his voice steady. "And I want this. I want us. I don't want to run anymore." And in that moment I understood. This wasn't about taking things slow anymore. This wasn't about the gradual unfolding of a relationship. This was about the leap into the unknown, into something new, into the promise of a future neither of us had ever allowed ourselves to imagine. But the leap wasn't easy. I could see it in Silas's eyes, the hesitation that lingered there. He had lived a life of carefully constructed walls, each one built to keep him safe, to protect him from the messiness of emotions, of love. But now those walls were crumbling, piece by piece. And for the first time, he was letting me in. We both had fears. I had mine too. I was terrified of what might happen if we let ourselves fall into this. What if it didn't work? What if we were both wrong? What if the world outside, the people we knew, the expectations we had, could never accept us for who we were becoming? But as I looked at him, as I saw the honesty in his face, I knew one thing for sure. This was the only way forward. We could keep running, keep pretending that we were just friends, just roommates. Or we could take the risk, together. "I don't want to go back to how things were," Silas said quietly, his fingers tracing the outline of my hand. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." I could feel the same fear in my chest, the weight of it threatening to pull me down. But I also felt something else. Hope. Hope for what could be, if we allowed ourselves to go there. The promise of a life where we didn't have to hide, where we didn't have to second-guess every word, every touch. A life where we could be honest, be real, be who we truly were without the fear of what might happen next. "I'm here," I said, my voice firm, even though I could feel the tremor in my chest. "I'm here, Silas, and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about love. This was about trust. Trust in each other, in ourselves, in what we were capable of building together. We had both been running for so long, but now we were ready to stop, to stay, to build something new, something real. And as the days passed, things began to shift, slowly but unmistakably. We didn't rush it. We didn't try to force anything, but we were there for each other, really there. When he needed space, I gave it. When he needed someone to hold him, I was right there, no questions asked. We were learning to navigate this new reality, one step at a time. But each step felt like progress. Each day we peeled back another layer, exposing more of ourselves than we had ever shown anyone. There were moments of doubt, of course. There always are. But those moments were different now. They weren't walls. They weren't reasons to pull away. They were just part of the process, part of the journey we had chosen to walk together. And so, we kept moving forward. We kept embracing what came next, even when we didn't know what that would look like. But we knew this. We were doing it together. And that was the only thing that mattered. There are moments in life when everything changes, and you feel like you've stepped into a new chapter, one that feels both exhilarating and terrifying. It's in those moments that we must decide, will we face what's coming next with courage, or will we stay behind, safe in the comfort of the familiar? For Silas and me, it wasn't an easy choice. The fear was real, the uncertainty was overwhelming. But we made a decision together. We decided to stop pretending, to stop running from what we were both feeling, and to step into the unknown, together. Sometimes, the hardest thing is embracing what's next. It's letting go of the past, of the stories we've told ourselves, the labels we've used to define who we are and who we're supposed to be. It's terrifying to open yourself up to someone, to allow them to see you for who you truly are, knowing that vulnerability means you're laying your heart out on the table, and the other person could walk away at any moment. But what I've learned through all of this is that real connection, the kind that goes beyond just attraction or infatuation, is worth the risk. It's worth the fear. It's worth choosing someone, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. And because when it matters most, they choose you too. Silas and I didn't have all the answers. We still don't. But what we've built in the days since that moment in the bathroom is something different. It's not perfect. It's not easy. But it's honest. And that, I believe, is the foundation of something real. We're learning to navigate this new territory, one step at a time. And it's messy. But it's also beautiful. When we decided to stop hiding, we decided to live fully. We decided to let go of the safety nets we had built around ourselves and trust that, even in the face of fear, we'd be okay. Because, in the end, there's something profoundly freeing about allowing yourself to embrace what comes next, the unknown. The messy moments. The beauty in the mess. As I look ahead, I know it's not going to be easy. There will be days when we'll question everything. There will be moments when we'll doubt ourselves and each other. But as long as we keep choosing honesty, as long as we keep choosing to show up for each other, I believe we'll be okay. We're not perfect. We don't have it all figured out, but we're embracing the journey of growth, of love, and of discovering who we are together. And in a world where everything often feels uncertain, there's something comforting in knowing that we're not facing it alone. So if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Don't be afraid to embrace what comes next. It's where the magic happens. It's where the real stories begin. And if you're lucky, you'll find someone who will walk beside you through the mess, the mistakes, and the triumphs, making the journey worth every step.